Today, we are going to look at the most terrifying footage before death, from a snowboarder who got caught in an avalanche to a hiker that tried to get the perfect shot at a cliff, not knowing this was a fatal mistake. Let's dive straight into it. It was July 14th, 2016, in the mountains above Odda, Norway. The weather was calm and clear, the kind that drew hikers from across the world to Trolltunga's dramatic cliff. By mid-morning, hundreds of visitors were already making their way up the trail, unaware that before the day ended, the quiet overhang would become the site of a fatal fall. Emma Dalton, 27, had been traveling through Scandinavia for 3 weeks. A primary school teacher from Leeds, she had a reputation among friends for being careful, organized, and happiest with a camera in her hand. She preferred photographing quiet corners of cities and isolated landscapes rather than joining high-risk adventures. Her parents said that Trolltunga had been on her list for years, not for the adrenaline, but for the view she wanted to capture at sunrise and midday. She was hiking with 2 Australians she had met at a hostel in Bergen. While they were more interested in ticking off famous locations, Emma was deliberate, stopping often to frame shots with her phone and small DSLR. The plan was to take turns posing on the cliff after reaching the top, then descend together before evening. The weather forecast had promised steady conditions, and she trusted that the well-worn tourist route would be safe if she stayed aware of her footing. The plateau above the fjord spread wide and flat, ending abruptly in Trolltunga's rock tongue, jutting nearly 2,300 feet over the blue water below. Around the viewing area, the rock surface was dry but showed pale cracks and uneven layers from years of erosion. Beyond the main overhang, a narrow ledge sloped slightly downward toward the void, where shards of loose stone rested on the edge. Norwegian safety officials warned that while the main rock was stable, the surrounding surfaces could fracture without warning, especially thinner flakes jutting from the cliff. Trolltunga's rock face was made of layered metamorphic stone, weathered by freeze-thaw cycles. Edges that appeared solid could crumble under a person's weight, even in dry conditions. They reached the cliff after nearly 4 hours. Tourists queued for the famous photo spot, standing well back until their turn. Emma took several wide shots of the fjord from behind the line before stepping toward the side area, looking for a more unique angle. The Australians told her the rock there was risky, but she seemed confident in her balance. The spot she chose had no guardrail, and a faint trail of boot scuffs marked where others had ventured before. She stepped onto the narrow ledge, keeping her phone raised to frame the overhang from the side. Witnesses later recalled her shifting her weight to adjust the shot. The sound of stone giving way was sharp and sudden. A thin slab beneath her right foot fractured, its edge breaking into several pieces that fell into the air. Emma pitched forward, her phone still in her grip. She flailed once, her left hand scraping the rock, leaving a faint smear of skin and dirt. One of the Australians lunged toward her but stopped short, unable to reach her in time. She disappeared over the side without a scream, the fall nearly vertical toward the water and rocks far below. The crowd went silent. A rescue call was made immediately, but the location's remoteness meant no helicopter could arrive until later in the afternoon. Search crews marked the last spot she was seen, using GPS to coordinate a recovery effort. By the following morning, Norwegian rescue teams located her body on a rock shelf near the base of the cliff. Her phone was found intact, with the final image partially blurred, showing the angle she had been attempting to capture. Emma's remains were flown back to the UK within the week. The funeral in Leeds was small, attended by family and close friends, with no media present. The local hiking board reinforced signs warning of unstable cliff edges and urged visitors to remain in designated viewing zones. It was January 15, 2023. A clear winter day in Nepal as Yeti Airlines Flight 691 prepared for its 27-minute journey from Kathmandu to Pokhara. Among the 72 passengers and crew on board was 25-year-old Sonu Jaiswal, a father of 3 from Ghazipur, India, who was traveling with 3 friends on a trip that was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime. The 4 friends, Jaiswal, Abhishek Kushwaha, Anil Rajbar, and Vishal Sharma, had left India on January 13th to visit Nepal's sacred Pashupatinath temple. Jaiswal, a small liquor store owner, had gone to pray for a son, as he already had 3 daughters. After their spiritual pilgrimage, the group headed to Pokhara for sightseeing and paragliding in the shadow of the majestic Annapurna mountain range. As Flight 691 approached Pokhara International Airport, Jaiswal did what millions of travelers do every day. He began recording the experience to share with friends and family back home. He started a Facebook live stream capturing the ATR 72-500 aircraft's descent through his window seat. The 90-second video began innocuously enough. Through the window, viewers could see buildings and green fields as the plane approached the runway. The atmosphere inside the cabin was relaxed. Passengers were chatting and laughing, completely unaware of the horror that would unfold in mere seconds. Jaiswal turned the camera toward himself, smiling in his yellow sweater, then panned to show his fellow passengers. There were no warning signs, no announcements from the cockpit, nothing to indicate that anything was amiss. The plane appeared to be making a routine landing approach. Then, without warning, the aircraft suddenly veered sharply to the left. The camera briefly captured the panicked cries of passengers as they realized something was terribly wrong. Within seconds, the footage became chaotic, the phone shaking violently as the plane lost control. The video recorded the bone-chilling sound of an engine screeching, followed by the sight of flames engulfing the frame, and then nothing. Flight 691 crashed into a gorge near the newly opened Pokhara International Airport, killing all 72 people on board. It was Nepal's deadliest aviation disaster in 30 years. In Ghazipur, nearly 270 miles from the crash site, news of the accident reached Jaiswal's family almost immediately as television channels began broadcasting images of the wreckage, the mangled fuselage still burning and billowing thick gray smoke. "We couldn't believe the news until we saw the video," said Jaiswal's brother Deepak, who was among the first family members to view the live stream that had since gone viral. "It was painful." The video provided a chilling first-person perspective of the disaster's final moments. Aviation experts later determined that the aircraft had stalled during its approach, possibly due to pilot error or mechanical failure. The plane's black box revealed that the pilot had asked for a change in runway just minutes before the crash. What made the tragedy even more poignant was the involvement of co-pilot Anju Katiwada, who had pursued years of pilot training after her husband died in a 2006 plane crash while flying for the same airline. In a cruel twist of fate, both husband and wife met the same end, 16 years apart. For the families of the victims, including Jaiswal's wife and 3 young daughters, the video was both a blessing and a curse, a final glimpse of their loved ones, but also an unbearable documentation of their final terrifying moments. Jaiswal's father traveled to Kathmandu to identify and retrieve his son's body. "He was not just my brother," Deepak Jaiswal said. "I have lost a friend in him." The tragedy of Sonu Jaiswal highlights the fragility of life and how quickly ordinary moments can turn catastrophic. His live stream, intended to share joy with loved ones, instead became a grim historical document, one of the few instances where the final moments before a plane crash were captured from inside the doomed aircraft. It was July 2013 in St. Petersburg, Russia, a warm summer day when the city's rooftops beckoned to those who dared to dance along their edges. For 24-year-old Pavel Kashin, the urban skyline wasn't just a backdrop, it was his canvas. A renowned parkour artist and freerunner, Pavel had built a reputation as one of Russia's most skilled practitioners of the dangerous art form, regularly performing death-defying stunts that left spectators in awe. On this fateful day, Pavel stood atop a 16-story residential building. The city sprawled beneath him like a living map. The ledge beneath his feet was barely 3 feet wide, a narrow concrete strip separating safety from a 200-foot drop to the unforgiving pavement below. For most, this precarious perch would trigger paralyzing fear. For Pavel, it was just another stage. A friend stood nearby, camera ready to capture what Pavel intended to be his most impressive stunt yet. A backflip performed on the building's edge. It was the kind of heart-stopping move that had earned him thousands of followers online, where videos of his gravity-defying feats regularly went viral. Pavel had performed similar stunts countless times before. His body knew the precise mechanics, the explosive jump, the tucked rotation, the calculated landing. Each movement had to be perfect. The margin for error was literally non-existent. One slight miscalculation meant death. As he prepared for the jump, Pavel likely felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the heightened awareness that comes when your life hangs in the balance. He took a deep breath, centered himself, and launched into the air. His body rotated perfectly, completing the full backflip as planned. Then came the landing. Pavel's feet touched the ledge, seemingly secure. For a split second, it appeared he had nailed the stunt. But something went wrong. Perhaps his foot placement was slightly off. Or maybe the concrete surface was more slippery than anticipated. Whatever the cause, Pavel lost his balance. The camera captured his final moment of stability, arms outstretched, body poised on the edge of the abyss. It's an image that would later circulate worldwide, as a chilling reminder of how quickly life can end. Unable to regain his footing, Pavel plummeted backward, falling the equivalent of a 16-story building. The 200-foot drop took approximately 4 seconds, enough time perhaps for Pavel to comprehend the finality of his mistake. When emergency services arrived, there was nothing to be done. Pavel Kashin was pronounced dead at the scene, his body broken by the impact with the ground below. News of Pavel's death spread rapidly through the parkour community, sending shockwaves across social media platforms where he had once been celebrated. Fellow freerunners mourned the loss of someone they considered among the best in the world, a pioneer who constantly pushed the boundaries of what was possible. In a surprising move, Pavel's parents consented to the circulation of the photograph showing their son's final moments. They hoped the image might serve as a warning to others about the real dangers of extreme parkour, particularly the practice known as roof-topping, where practitioners perform stunts on the edges of tall buildings without safety equipment. Pavel's death wasn't the first tragedy in the parkour community. A year earlier, a 24-year-old Russian woman had fallen 17 stories to her death during her first parkour lesson in the same city. But Pavel's prominence made his death particularly impactful. The photograph of Pavel Kashin's final backflip stands as a haunting reminder of how thin the line between triumph and tragedy can be. In that frozen moment, body perfectly balanced, the abyss waiting below, we see both the breathtaking skill and the fatal risk that defined his short life. For those who continue to practice parkour, Pavel's story serves as a sobering reminder that even the most skilled practitioners are never immune to gravity's unforgiving pull. It was August 6, 2017, in Vatnajökull National Park, Iceland. The morning sky was bright, but hazed with thin cloud, and the glacier's surface reflected the light in muted silver. Meltwater trickled in narrow streams across the ice, disappearing into fissures that hinted at unseen depth. For most visitors, the day felt calm and unthreatening. For one group of friends, it would end in silence and cold water. James Rowley, 29, was an Australian tourist traveling with 3 longtime friends. Back home in Melbourne, he worked as a mechanical technician and was known for his practical skills and steady temperament. He had joined the trip for its landscapes, eager to see glaciers before the chance disappeared. Photography had become a casual hobby for him, more about recording moments than producing art. The decision to leave the marked trail was made without much debate. They had followed a side path toward an overhanging ice shelf above a meltwater pool. James wanted a shot standing with the drop and the blue water behind him. From his perspective, the ice looked solid enough. The surface showed only faint cracks and wet patches from recent melt, but nothing that suggested immediate danger. The glacier's upper layer was rough underfoot, patterned with shallow ridges and pale blue streaks. Thin streams wound through the surface, feeding the pool below. Beyond the edge, a dark cavity opened beneath the shelf, carved by weeks of warm weather. The air was near freezing, but the sound of water moving under the ice carried a steady, muted force. Glacial ice, though dense, can lose stability quickly when temperatures rise. Overhanging shelves often conceal deep fractures, their strength undermined from below by meltwater channels. Such ice can fail without warning, collapsing in large sections. Rangers in the park regularly warn visitors to stay on marked routes, as undercut shelves can break under a single person's weight. Before the accident, one of James's friends suggested staying back from the edge. He acknowledged it but stepped toward the center of the shelf, his phone in his left hand. His friend raised a camera, framing him against the pool. The ice under James's boots gave a dull, hollow sound, sharper than the surrounding surface. A thin crack ran outward from beneath him, spreading quickly with a sharp, brittle snap. In the photograph taken at that moment, the fracture can be seen tracing a jagged line toward the shelf's edge. The sound drew the others' attention just as the ice gave way in a single downward drop. James vanished into the pool, the collapse throwing shards of ice into the water. He resurfaced seconds later, gasping, his movement slowed by the freezing temperature. The current pulled him toward the cavity under the remaining ice. His arm struck against the edge as he tried to grip it, but the slick surface offered nothing to hold. One friend reached down with a trekking pole, but the gap widened as pieces broke away. The pole's tip slid off the ice each time they tried to hook him. James disappeared into the cavity, the water sealing over him. The only sound left was the rush of meltwater. Rescue teams searched the channels for 2 days before finding his body downstream, wedged against submerged ice blocks and carried by the undercurrent. His phone was recovered in the same channel, its casing cracked with the final image still stored. His funeral in Melbourne was attended by family and close friends. Park authorities later extended barriers along unstable sections and reinforced public advisories about the risk of walking on unsupported ice. It was April 1st, 2014, and best friends Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon were living their dream adventure in the mountain town of Boquete, Panama. The 21 and 22-year-old Dutch students had arrived 2 weeks earlier to volunteer teaching local children, staying with a welcoming host family who had quickly grown fond of the enthusiastic young women. Both were experienced travelers who had backpacked through Europe together, but the dense jungle terrain of Central America presented challenges they had never encountered before. Chris, a cultural social work student, was known for her infectious laugh and ability to connect with people from any background. Lisanne, studying applied psychology, was the more cautious of the two, always researching destinations thoroughly and keeping detailed travel journals. They had spent their first weeks in Panama learning basic Spanish phrases and exploring the charming coffee town of Boquete, taking hundreds of photos to share with friends and family back in the Netherlands. The girls had planned their hike on the popular El Pianista Trail as a simple day trip, bringing along their host family's dog for companionship and protection. The trail was well known among tourists for its beautiful views of the surrounding mountains and cloud forests, typically taking 2 to 3 hours to complete. They packed light snacks, water bottles, and their cameras, excited to capture Panama's natural beauty and add new photos to their growing collection of travel memories. The morning started perfectly as Chris and Lisanne took cheerful selfies at the trailhead, their faces beaming with excitement as they posed with the family dog. The first hour of hiking was exactly what they had hoped for: scenic views, exotic birds, and the peaceful sounds of the jungle surrounding them. Their early photos showed them laughing and enjoying each other's company, completely unaware of the tragedy that was about to unfold. As they continued deeper into the jungle, their photos began to show a subtle change in mood. The smiles became less frequent, and their expressions grew more serious as the trail became less defined and more challenging to navigate. Around 1:00 p.m., they took their final daytime photos before mysteriously continuing past the trail's normal endpoint, venturing into uncharted territory where few tourists had ever traveled. 6 hours later, at 4:39 p.m., their phones registered the first of what would become 77 desperate attempts to call emergency services. The calls showed a pattern of increasing panic as the girls realized they were lost and in serious danger. Only one call managed to connect for exactly 2 seconds before the signal was lost, leaving them stranded without any means of communication with the outside world. When the girls failed to return that evening, their host family immediately contacted local authorities and launched a search operation. The initial efforts involved local police, volunteers, and eventually international search teams, but the dense jungle terrain made progress extremely difficult. For 10 weeks, there was no trace of Chris and Lisanne, leading to widespread speculation about their fate. The breakthrough came when a local woman discovered Lisanne's backpack by a riverbank, perfectly preserved and containing their phones, camera, and other personal items. The camera revealed the most disturbing evidence: 90 photos taken during the night of April 8th, 7 days after their disappearance. The haunting images showed makeshift markers, plastic bags, and what appeared to be attempts to signal for help in complete darkness. Search teams eventually found scattered remains along the riverbank, with some bones mysteriously bleached white despite the short time period. Most disturbing was the discovery that one crucial photo had been deliberately deleted from the camera. The case remains officially unsolved, with theories ranging from tragic accident to foul play, but the truth about what happened to Chris and Lisanne may never be known. It was January 28, 2016, in Bislig City, Philippines. The air was warm and damp, carrying the steady roar of Tinuian Falls as it spilled in sheets over the rock face. Visitors moved along the pathways below, unaware that higher up on the slick ledges near the top, a moment of carelessness would turn a family outing into tragedy. Lourdes Ramos, 42, was a school teacher from Surigao del Sur. She was known among her colleagues for her patience with younger students and for organizing class trips to local landmarks. This visit was personal, a day with her sister's family before the start of the next school term. She enjoyed taking photos to remember such moments, often making sure the scenery was framed perfectly. Her decision to climb onto the rocks at the waterfall's edge was not reckless in her mind. She had grown up near rivers and streams, used to navigating wet stone. From her perspective, the ledge offered the best view, both of the cascade below and of the surrounding forest. Her relatives followed, stopping at various points to take their own pictures. From the top, the view opened into a wide curtain of water, the falls stretching nearly 300 feet across. Mist hung in the air, coating the rocks in a fine layer of moisture. The river above looked calm until it reached the drop, where the current surged, funneled between outcroppings. Below, the pool churned with foam, sending up bursts of spray that reached the lower viewing platforms. Tinuian Falls' upper ledge can be deceptive. The flat stones conceal slick patches of algae, and even shallow water there moves with more force than it appears. The current can pull unexpectedly, especially near the lip where the river accelerates. According to local guides, park officials had previously placed ropes and signs warning visitors to stay back, but in 2016, these barriers did not cover certain side approaches that could be reached by walking along the riverbank. Before the incident, Lourdes and her relatives took turns posing on the wider section of the ledge. One of them recalled her inching closer to the drop for a better angle. She held her phone out, adjusting her stance to capture both herself and the span of the falls behind. Her next step landed on a slick patch. Her foot slid forward, and she dropped to her hands and knees. The current, shallow but fast, pressed against her legs, pushing her toward the edge. She tried to shift backward, but her palm slipped on the wet stone. Her nephew reached toward her, but the gap was too great. Witnesses said the water carried her over the lip, her body vanishing instantly into the spray. The sound of the falls drowned out all other noise. Witnesses below saw a figure hit the pool in a plume of white water. She did not resurface. Park staff called for divers, who entered the water from the calmer downstream section. The search took less than 2 hours. Her body was brought to shore that afternoon, wrapped in a tarp and carried to a waiting vehicle. Her phone, found lodged between 2 rocks downstream, was still functional, the final image frozen mid-frame. The funeral was held quietly in Surigao del Sur, attended by relatives, colleagues, and several students. In the weeks following, park officials later extended warning ropes along the upper approach, citing the accident as a reason for stricter access control.
It was February 27, 2015, and 18-year-old Daylen Mokpua woke up early in his grandmother's house in Kaneohe, Hawaii, with adventure on his mind. The athletic teenager had always been drawn to Hawaii's most challenging hiking trails, spending weekends exploring hidden waterfalls and remote beaches that most tourists never discovered. His friends knew him as fearless, the type of guy who would climb the tallest coconut palm or dive from the highest cliff without hesitation. Daylen had been researching the infamous haiku stairs for months, studying online forums and watching YouTube videos of other hikers who had attempted the illegal trail. Known locally as the Stairway to Heaven, the 4,000-step metal staircase had been built during World War II to access a military radio station but had been closed to the public since 1987. The trail was notorious for its narrow passages, some sections only 18 inches wide, with sheer drops of over 2,000 feet on either side. His grandmother Martha had repeatedly warned him about the dangers, sharing stories of hikers who had fallen to their deaths or become lost in the dense jungle surrounding the stairs. But Daylen was confident in his abilities, having successfully completed dozens of challenging hikes across Oahu's mountain ranges. He told his family he was going on a routine hike that morning, carefully avoiding any mention of his true destination. At 6:30 a.m., he grabbed his backpack, phone, and water bottle, kissing his grandmother goodbye before heading out into the humid Hawaiian morning. The first few hours of Daylen's climb went smoothly as he sent regular selfies and photos to his grandmother, documenting his progress up the steep metal stairs. His early photos showed him smiling confidently, the lush green mountains of Oahu stretching endlessly behind him. As he climbed higher, the views became more spectacular, but the trail also became increasingly treacherous, with rusted metal steps and missing handrails creating deadly obstacles. Around 10:30 a.m., Dalen took what would become his most famous and mysterious photograph. The image showed him posing on the stairs, but in the background, barely visible among the dense vegetation, was a dark figure crouching in the bushes. The figure appeared to be watching him, though its identity and intentions remain unknown to this day. Dalen continued climbing, unaware that someone, or something, might be following his progress. At exactly 11:00 a.m., Dalen's regular stream of photos and messages suddenly stopped without explanation. His phone showed no further activity, and his grandmother began to worry when hours passed without contact. Other hikers in the area later reported hearing desperate cries for help echoing through the jungle, with voices shouting, "Help me! I'm down here!" But despite extensive searching, no one could locate the source of the calls. When Dalen failed to return home that evening, his family immediately contacted authorities and reported him missing. The Honolulu Fire Department launched a massive search operation that would continue for 5 days, involving helicopters, ground teams, volunteers, and even the U.S. Navy. Drones scoured the dense jungle canopy while experienced climbers rappelled down cliff faces, but no trace of Dalen was ever found. The search efforts continued sporadically for years, with volunteers and family members refusing to give up hope. The mysterious figure in Dalen's final photograph sparked countless theories and investigations, but its identity was never determined. In 2021, the Haiku Stairs were finally scheduled for removal due to safety concerns and illegal trespassing, but Dalen's disappearance remains one of Hawaii's most haunting unsolved mysteries.
It was April 19, 2018, in Moscow, Russia. The late afternoon sky was pale and cloudless, the city's edges washed in cold light. From 20 stories up, the wind moved with steady force, rattling loose sheet metal and whistling through scaffolding gaps. On the roof of a half-renovated office block, 3 students looked over a view that was both impressive and precarious. Ivan Petrov, 19, was studying engineering at a local university. He was quiet in class, known for his patience with difficult coursework and for helping classmates with calculations. Outside of school, he enjoyed exploring disused structures with a small circle of friends, more for the challenge than for recognition. He did not post videos or photos publicly, but he kept them for himself, as a record of places few others had been. The renovation site had been on his list since winter. Access was simple. A cut section of fence led to a stairwell without a locked door. The 3 climbed to the roof to take photos before the building's repairs progressed and security tightened. Ivan's plan was to walk a narrow beam along the edge for a self-portrait with the skyline behind him. Though he understood the height risk, he believed his balance and experience made it manageable. The rooftop was a mix of open flat sections and exposed framework. Dust and debris from months of construction work coated most surfaces. Below the roofline, a lattice of beams and scaffold supports extended toward the street. The wind pressed against clothing and shifted small scraps of insulation across the surface. From the beam, the drop was uninterrupted to the pavement far below. Wind speeds that day reached about 25 miles per hour, with occasional cross gusts that could push a standing person off balance. Narrow metal beams, even dry, offered little traction when covered in dust. Safety harnesses were required for construction crews working at such heights, but none of the 3 carried any protective equipment. Before stepping onto the beam, Ivan's friends told him the wind seemed stronger near the edge. He acknowledged it, but moved forward, holding his phone in front of him. He took 2 careful steps, pausing to adjust his footing. The beam shifted slightly under his weight, but he remained upright. A sudden crosswind gust struck from his left, catching him mid-step. His shoulders rolled with the force, and he swayed toward the open side. He tried to correct, shifting his weight back, but his right shoe slid over the dusty metal surface. The slip was small, but enough to break his balance. His arms went out as he staggered backward, the phone tilting upward to catch a brief image of the sky. For less than a second, he hovered against the wind before tipping over the edge. His friends shouted and ran to the side, but there was nothing to grab. The phone continued recording as it fell, the sound of wind drowning all else. It struck a lower beam briefly before tumbling to the pavement, its screen cracking on impact. The final seconds showed blurred motion and the gray concrete below. Emergency services arrived within minutes, blocking the street and sealing the site entrance. Ivan's body was recovered from the base of the building. His phone was found nearby, still recording when picked up. His funeral was held in Moscow the following week, attended by relatives and classmates. Local authorities increased patrols at unsecured construction areas, citing the incident as part of a growing pattern of unauthorized rooftop access in the city.
It was January 19th, 2019, and 36-year-old Gigi Wu was preparing for another solo climbing adventure in Taiwan's Yushan National Park, known internationally as the Bikini Climber. Gigi had built a massive social media following by taking provocative selfies in bikinis atop mountain summits over 13,000 feet high. Her unique combination of serious mountaineering skills and eye-catching photography had earned her thousands of followers who eagerly awaited each new post from her daring adventures. Despite her provocative online persona, Gigi was a highly experienced and safety-conscious climber who always wore proper gear during her ascents. She had completed over 100 successful climbs throughout Asia, including some of the region's most challenging peaks. Her routine was always the same: climb in full winter gear, reach the summit safely, quickly change into a bikini for photos, then immediately return to proper clothing for the descent. Gigi's friends and fellow climbers respected her technical skills and knowledge of mountain safety protocols. She carried satellite communication devices, emergency supplies, and always filed detailed climbing plans with local authorities. Her social media posts often included safety tips and warnings about the dangers of mountain climbing, despite the seemingly reckless nature of her signature bikini photos. This particular trek to Taiwan's tallest mountains was meant to be another routine adventure for her popular Instagram account. Gigi had climbed in this area multiple times before and was familiar with the terrain and weather patterns. She had checked conditions carefully and planned her route to avoid the most dangerous sections during the winter season. The climb began successfully as Gigi made steady progress up the mountain, documenting her journey with regular photos and GPS updates. She reached the summit without incident and took her signature bikini selfie, quickly changing back into her winter gear as temperatures dropped below freezing. The descent started normally, but tragedy struck when she slipped on an icy section and fell into a deep ravine. Unable to move due to serious injuries from the fall, Gigi managed to use her satellite phone to call for help and alert rescue services to her location. She provided detailed coordinates and described her condition, but weather conditions were rapidly deteriorating as a winter storm moved into the area. Rescue teams were dispatched immediately, but faced dangerous conditions that prevented them from reaching her quickly. As hours passed, hypothermia began setting in while Gigi waited for rescue in the freezing ravine. She made several more calls to update rescuers on her condition, but her voice grew weaker with each conversation. The rescue teams worked frantically to reach her location, but the combination of harsh weather, difficult terrain, and approaching darkness made progress extremely slow. Despite the heroic efforts of rescue teams, Gigi succumbed to hypothermia before they could reach her location. Her death shocked her thousands of followers who had watched her daring adventures for years, many of whom had never considered the real dangers behind her spectacular photos. The incident sparked widespread debates about the risks of extreme selfie culture and the responsibility of social media influencers to promote safety. Mountain rescue organizations used Gigi's case to emphasize the importance of proper safety measures and backup plans, even for experienced climbers. Her story became a cautionary tale about how even the most skilled adventurers can fall victim to unexpected circumstances, and how the pursuit of social media content should never compromise basic safety protocols.
It was September 2nd, 2023, a bright, clear day in San Pedro, Mexico, where a joyous celebration was about to turn into a nightmare. Luis Angel N., a 32-year-old pilot, prepared for what should have been a routine flight, a gender reveal stunt for an expectant couple. The small Piper PA-25 aircraft had been fitted with a special mechanism to release colored smoke, announcing to the gathered crowd whether the couple's baby would be a boy or a girl. For Luis, this was familiar territory. He had performed similar stunts before, releasing colored powder from his aircraft for celebrations. The job was straightforward: fly low over the party, release the pink smoke to reveal the couple was having a girl, and continue on his way. It was the kind of gig that combined his passion for flying with the joy of helping others celebrate life's precious moments. The couple stood beneath a large illuminated sign reading, "Oh baby," surrounded by friends and family eagerly awaiting the big reveal. Cameras were rolling, ready to capture the moment of surprise and delight. No one could have imagined they would instead document a tragedy. As Luis approached the gathering in his single-engine crop duster, everything initially went according to plan. The aircraft descended to approximately 200 feet above the ground, low enough for the dramatic effect, but still within safe operating parameters. The pink smoke began to trail behind the plane, eliciting cheers from the crowd below. Simultaneously, confetti cannons on the ground exploded with pink paper, confirming the news. A baby girl was on the way. The couple embraced, their faces beaming with joy, completely unaware of what was happening in the sky above them. Just seconds after releasing the colored smoke, as Luis attempted to bank the aircraft away from the celebration, disaster struck. The left wing of the Piper PA-25 suddenly failed. Whether due to structural stress, a mechanical failure, or the additional strain of the low-altitude maneuver, the wing catastrophically collapsed. Aviation experts who later analyzed the footage suggested that Luis may have pulled too hard on the control stick, overstressing the wings during the turn. The aircraft immediately lost lift and began to spin uncontrollably. Luis, with likely only seconds to react, found himself in an unrecoverable flat spin. The plane spiraled toward the ground at a terrifying rate, disappearing behind trees and buildings as it plummeted. The impact occurred just a few hundred yards from the celebration. The sound of the crash was drowned out by the music and cheering, a cruel juxtaposition of joy and tragedy occurring simultaneously. While the couple continued celebrating their news, Luis lay critically injured in the twisted wreckage of his aircraft. Emergency services rushed to the scene, extracting Luis from the mangled cockpit. Paramedics from the Sinaloa Red Cross provided immediate treatment before transporting him to a nearby hospital. Despite their best efforts, Luis succumbed to his injuries shortly after arrival. The video of the incident went viral, showing the stark contrast between the celebrating couple and the aircraft disintegrating in the background. Viewers were disturbed by how the camera panned back to the joyful couple, seemingly oblivious to the pilot's fate. Luis Angel N. became another tragic statistic in a growing list of gender reveal celebrations gone wrong. Since 2019, these increasingly elaborate events have been linked to multiple deaths, wildfires, and explosions across the globe. For Luis, what began as a routine job ended in the ultimate sacrifice. His story serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly celebration can turn to tragedy, and how the pursuit of the perfect moment can sometimes come at an unimaginable cost. It was February 14, 2016, when Marcus Chen made the decision that would forever change everything. The 28-year-old IT support technician from Denver had always been the quiet type, preferring computer screens to social gatherings. His co-workers knew him as reliable but reserved, someone who kept to himself and rarely joined after-work activities. Snowboarding had become Marcus's escape from troubleshooting network issues. For 5 years, he had methodically worked up from bunny slopes to intermediate runs, always cautious, always within his comfort zone. His technique was decent but unrefined, the product of weekend warrior dedication rather than natural talent. 3 months earlier, Marcus started a YouTube channel called Chen's Mountain Adventures, hoping to document his progression. With only 200 subscribers, mostly friends and fellow snowboarding enthusiasts, his videos rarely broke double-digit views, but Marcus persisted, driven by quiet determination to prove he could be more than another cubicle worker. Devil's Peak had been calling to him for weeks. He had watched other YouTubers carve down its pristine slopes, their cameras capturing powder sprays like liquid diamonds. The 45-degree gradient promised dramatic footage that might finally boost his channel. What Marcus failed to research was why those slopes remained so perfectly untouched. At 6 a.m. on that Valentine's morning, Marcus arrived at Devil's Peak alone, his chest-mounted GoPro recording. The parking area was eerily empty, and multiple orange warning signs caught his attention briefly. Avalanche danger, they proclaimed. But Marcus had seen similar signs at other mountains where he had snowboarded safely. His inexperience with backcountry conditions made him dismiss the warnings as standard legal protection. The hike took 45 minutes, his breath forming crystalline clouds in -15-degree air. Marcus narrated his ascent, his voice betraying nervous excitement about his most challenging run yet. Wind had been working on the snow for days, creating what experts would later identify as a classic wind-loaded slab formation. At 7:23 a.m., Marcus began his descent, his board cutting confidently through the upper section. The GoPro captured every moment as he gained speed, his technique surprisingly smooth for someone attempting terrain beyond his skill level. About 200 feet down, he attempted a more aggressive turn. The moment his edge bit into the wind-loaded snow slab, physics took control. The fracture line propagated across the slope face with thunderous sound, creating a Class 4 avalanche measuring 15,000 cubic meters of moving snow. Marcus's camera recorded his realization that the entire mountainside was moving beneath him. The GoPro captured horrifying details as Marcus was swept up in snow traveling at 60 miles per hour, his body tumbling violently 800 vertical feet down the mountain. The camera recorded sickening impacts as he struck buried rocks and trees, suffering compound fractures to both legs and severe internal trauma. The avalanche came to rest in a natural depression, leaving Marcus buried under 12 feet of compacted snow. The GoPro continued recording for 3 minutes and 47 seconds, capturing only darkness and gradually slowing breathing before the battery died. Search and rescue teams began searching February 16th after Marcus failed to return home. The recovery took 6 days, hampered by unstable conditions. When they located Marcus using avalanche transceivers, the GoPro remained attached, its memory card intact. The footage became a sobering reminder of how quickly mountains turn deadly. Devil's Peak's warning system was upgraded with multilingual postings and detailed avalanche education. Marcus's YouTube channel, frozen at 200 subscribers, became an unintended memorial to respecting mountain warnings and understanding limitations.
It was August 2014, and 21-year-old Oscar Otero Aguilar was enjoying a night out with friends in Mexico City, celebrating and socializing in the carefree way that young people do when they feel invincible. Oscar was known among his social circle as someone who loved being the center of attention, always ready with a joke or willing to do something outrageous to get a laugh. His Facebook account was filled with bold photos and attention-grabbing posts that showcased his outgoing personality and desire to stand out from the crowd. The 21-year-old had grown up in a working-class neighborhood of Mexico City, where showing toughness and fearlessness was often seen as a mark of respect among young men. Oscar worked at a local auto parts store during the day but lived for his evenings and weekends, when he could hang out with friends and escape the routine of daily life. His social media presence was important to him, and he was always looking for new ways to create dramatic and memorable posts that would impress his followers. That particular evening, Oscar and his friends had been drinking and celebrating at a small gathering when someone brought out a handgun. In Mexico, where gun violence was a serious problem, firearms were unfortunately not uncommon in certain social circles. The group was in a celebratory mood and had been taking various photos throughout the evening, documenting their night out with the kind of casual snapshots that young people share constantly on social media platforms. Oscar was particularly excited about the opportunity to take what he thought would be an edgy and impressive selfie. He had built his online reputation on posting bold and attention-grabbing content, and the presence of the gun seemed like the perfect prop for a dramatic photo that would get reactions from his Facebook friends. None of the group realized the weapon was loaded, treating it as a harmless accessory rather than the deadly instrument it actually was. As the evening progressed and the alcohol continued to flow, Oscar's judgment became increasingly impaired. He decided to pose for what he thought would be the ultimate dramatic selfie, holding the loaded gun to his head in a pose he believed would look tough and impressive. His friends watched as he positioned the weapon against his temple, completely unaware of the tragic consequences that were about to unfold. Oscar held his phone in one hand while pressing the gun against his head with the other, trying to frame the perfect shot that would capture both his face and the weapon in a way that looked dramatic and dangerous. As he attempted to take the selfie, his finger accidentally triggered the gun's mechanism while he was focused on getting the right angle for the photo. The weapon discharged instantly, shooting him in the head at point-blank range. The sound of the gunshot shocked everyone in the room as what had been a fun photo session turned into a horrific accident in the span of seconds. Oscar collapsed immediately, blood pooling around his head as his friends screamed and tried to comprehend what had just happened. Emergency services were called immediately, and Oscar was still alive when paramedics arrived at the scene. The medical team worked frantically to stabilize him and rushed him to the hospital, but his injuries were too severe. He tragically died in the ambulance on the way to receive medical treatment, never making it to the operating room where doctors might have been able to save his life. Mexico's Ministry of Public Security investigated the incident and confirmed the death as accidental, though they also arrested one of Oscar's friends who had been present at the scene. Another friend fled before police could question him, adding to the chaos and confusion surrounding the tragedy. The case became widely reported throughout Mexico and internationally as a stark example of the deadly risks of combining weapons with social media culture. Oscar's death served as a tragic reminder of how the pursuit of dramatic social media content can lead to fatal consequences, especially when combined with alcohol and poor judgment. His story became part of a growing catalog of selfie-related deaths that highlighted the dangerous lengths some people will go to for online attention and validation.
It was August 12, 2016, when 24-year-old Kevin Park made a decision that would forever change how Arizona's slot canyons are monitored. Kevin was a recent college graduate from Portland, Oregon, working part-time at a camera store while building his photography portfolio. Standing 5 feet 8 inches with messy brown hair, Kevin possessed the restless energy of someone determined to make his mark. His personality mixed ambition with inexperience. Kevin had discovered slot canyon photography just 6 months earlier, after seeing stunning images online. The narrow, sculpted passages captivated his imagination, though he remained a novice hiker with only 3 previous canyon explorations in safer areas. Kevin was staying at a rundown Page, Arizona motel, surviving on a $200 budget for his week-long photography vacation. His beat-up Honda Civic contained basic discount hiking gear, and his most valuable possession was a mid-range DSLR camera he'd saved months to afford. At 1:30 p.m., Kevin began live streaming to his modest YouTube channel of 150 subscribers. His channel, Kevin's Canyon Quest, documented his journey from amateur to professional photographer. He was particularly excited about this narrow, technical slot canyon exploration. The Antelope Canyon area was experiencing typical August weather, with afternoon thunderstorms building over distant mesas. Kevin, focused on photography and eager to impress his online audience, failed to recognize the significance of darkening clouds 15 miles away. At exactly 2:45 p.m., while Kevin crouched in a narrow canyon section adjusting camera settings and narrating to viewers, rushing water echoed off canyon walls. Within seconds, a 6-foot wall of muddy water and debris traveling at 20 miles per hour rounded the bend ahead. Kevin's live stream captured everything. His voice shifted from excitement to panic as he realized his situation. The smooth, sculpted walls offered no handholds or escape routes. Kevin attempted to climb, his sneakers slipping against polished sandstone as water rose around his legs. The torrent swept Kevin 200 yards downstream in 30 seconds. His phone recorded the chaotic tumble through churning brown water filled with rocks and debris. The final moment showed Kevin's head striking a large boulder before the phone submerged, ending the broadcast. Kevin suffered a severe skull fracture and drowned in turbulent floodwater. His body became wedged between rocks as the flood continued through the canyon system. Search and rescue teams, alerted by concerned viewers who witnessed the live stream, found Kevin's body 12 hours later when the water receded. The recovery required specialized equipment and experienced canyon rescue personnel. Kevin's tragic death sparked significant safety changes. Authorities installed improved warning signs about flash flood dangers at canyon entrances, enhanced weather monitoring systems for slot canyon areas, and developed better communication protocols between meteorologists and park services. His story serves as a sobering reminder that nature's beauty often masks deadly dangers, and that experience, preparation, and respect for natural forces can mean the difference between capturing the perfect shot and becoming another cautionary tale carved into the desert's unforgiving landscape. It was May 18, 1980, a deceptively calm Sunday morning in southwestern Washington state. The skies were clear, and Mount St. Helens stood majestically against the horizon, its northern face bulging ominously after weeks of seismic activity. For 48-year-old photographer Robert Landsberg, this was the perfect day to document the changing volcano that had captivated his attention for weeks. Landsberg, a freelance photographer from Portland, Oregon, had been meticulously tracking Mount St. Helens. Helens' transformation. He'd visited the mountain repeatedly since March, when the first tremors signaled potential volcanic activity. Each trip yielded stunning images of the growing bulge on the mountain's northern slope, a deformation that was expanding outward at a rate of 5 to 8 feet per day. That morning, Landsberg drove his 1969 Dodge station wagon to a ridge approximately 4 miles from the summit. The location offered a perfect vantage point to capture the volcano's evolution. He set up his tripod, mounted his camera, and prepared to document what he hoped would be another day of gradual changes to the mountain's profile. In his journal the night before, Landsberg had written, "Feel right on the verge of something." His intuition would prove tragically accurate. At 8:32 a.m., a 5.1 magnitude earthquake struck beneath the volcano. Through his viewfinder, Landsberg witnessed the unthinkable. The entire north face of Mount St. Helens began to collapse. What followed was the most destructive volcanic eruption in U.S. history, as the mountain released 24 megatons of thermal energy, equivalent to 1,600 Hiroshima bombs. Landsberg kept photographing. His camera captured the initial lateral blast, the massive ash cloud that rose thousands of feet into the air, and the pyroclastic flow, a deadly mixture of superheated gas, ash, and rock, racing toward him at over 300 miles per hour. As the wall of ash approached, Landsberg made a series of deliberate final actions that reveal extraordinary presence of mind. Knowing he couldn't outrun the blast, he rewound the film back into its canister, placed the camera in his backpack, and then laid his body over the backpack to protect its precious contents. Minutes later, the pyroclastic flow engulfed Landsberg. The superheated ash, reaching temperatures of 800 degrees Fahrenheit, killed him instantly. His body, like 56 others claimed by the eruption that day, became entombed under layers of volcanic debris. For 17 days, Landsberg remained missing. When rescue workers finally discovered his body on June 4th, they found something remarkable. The backpack beneath him had protected his camera and film from the worst of the heat and ash. Though slightly damaged, the film was intact enough to be developed. The photographs recovered from Landsberg's camera provided scientists with invaluable documentation of the eruption's initial stages. His final images show the massive ash cloud growing larger in each frame, approaching his position with terrifying speed. These photos, published in the January 1981 issue of National Geographic, included not just the eruption, but also the scratches, bubbles, warpings, and light leaks caused by heat and ash, the very thumbprint of Holocaust. Landsberg wasn't the only photographer to die that day. Reed Blackburn, a 27-year-old photographer for the Columbian newspaper, was also killed while documenting the eruption from a campsite about 8 miles from the summit. Unlike Landsberg's, Blackburn's film didn't survive the intense heat. USGS volcanologist David Johnston also perished while monitoring the volcano from an observation post 6 miles away. His last words, transmitted by radio, were, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it," before the signal went dead as the pyroclastic flow engulfed him. What sets Landsberg's story apart is his conscious decision in those final moments. He could have attempted to flee, though it would have been futile. Instead, he chose to secure his work, knowing that his documentation might provide crucial scientific insights. In those last seconds, as death approached at hundreds of miles per hour, he made the ultimate sacrifice for science. The eruption dramatically altered the landscape, reducing Mount St. Helens' height by 1,300 feet and leaving a horseshoe-shaped crater. The blast zone extended for miles, flattening forests and turning lush greenery into a gray moonscape. Robert Landsberg's final act wasn't just that of a photographer committed to his craft. It was a conscious decision to preserve scientific evidence at the cost of his own life. His photographs stand as both his legacy and his final gift to science. Images captured literally at the edge of oblivion. It was March 22, 2018, when a routine construction day in Manhattan's Upper East Side turned into a catastrophic reminder of how quickly industrial accidents can shatter lives. Miguel Santos, 26, had been chasing the American dream for 3 years since immigrating from Guadalajara, Mexico. Standing 5 feet 6 inches with muscular arms earned from manual labor, Miguel possessed infectious optimism, despite the language barrier that sometimes left him nodding along to conversations he only half understood. Living in a cramped Queens apartment with his wife Carmen and 18-month-old daughter Isabella, Miguel worked construction 6 days a week, sending half his paycheck to his elderly parents in Mexico. His limited English made him hesitant to speak up, but his work ethic was legendary on job sites. Miguel had discovered that volunteering for extra duties like social media documentation could earn overtime pay. The construction company required progress footage for their website, and Miguel eagerly volunteered, seeing it as an opportunity to prove his value beyond manual labor. The 47-story luxury residential project on East 79th Street was behind schedule, creating pressure that trickled down to workers like Miguel. Project foreman Rick Castellano, known for cutting corners, had positioned Miguel near the crane's base with instructions to capture dramatic, close-up shots of concrete beam lifts. What Miguel didn't know was that Castellano had deliberately placed him inside the crane's exclusion zone, the safety perimeter that should have been off-limits during lifting operations. The foreman wanted impressive footage for clients, and Miguel's eagerness made him perfect for the dangerous assignment. At 2:30 p.m., Miguel stood directly beneath the towering 150-foot crane, phone in hand, filming as operator Antonio Reyes attempted to lift a massive 5-ton concrete beam. The crane, a 20-year-old model working overtime for months, groaned under excessive weight beyond its rated capacity. Miguel's phone captured the critical moment when the overloaded boom began to buckle. The footage showed the exact instant when the weld joint at the boom's base, weakened by metal fatigue from months of overuse, started to crack and fail. The recording continued as the massive steel boom snapped completely, the 150-foot structure beginning its deadly descent directly toward Miguel's position. Despite the chaos above, Miguel remained focused on filming, unaware that death was falling from the sky. The boom struck Miguel with devastating force after its 150-foot fall. He suffered catastrophic crushing injuries to his head and torso, dying instantly from the impact. His phone continued recording for several seconds before going black. Antonio survived in his operator's cab but suffered severe psychological trauma. The experienced crane operator, who had repeatedly warned management about the equipment's deteriorating condition, quit construction work entirely. The first 8 seconds of Miguel's phone footage were recovered from the damaged memory card. The partial recording provided crucial evidence of the overloading and structural failure that led to the tragedy. City inspectors used Miguel's final footage to identify multiple safety violations, including deliberate placement of workers inside exclusion zones and equipment use beyond rated capacity. The investigation revealed a pattern of ignored safety shortcuts. Miguel's family received a substantial settlement that secured Isabella's education and allowed Carmen to stay home. Enhanced exclusion zones and stricter crane safety enforcement were implemented citywide. Miguel's final documentation had exposed the deadly consequences of prioritizing profits over worker safety, ensuring his sacrifice would protect future construction workers reaching for their own American dreams. It was March 3, 2017, in Hyderabad, India. The midday air was dry, and the sun sat high, casting hard shadows along the railway corridor that cut through the outskirts of the city. From a distance, the faint metallic hum of steel on steel came and went with the wind, a reminder that the track was never truly silent. Rahul Varma, 21, was a college student in the final year of his commerce degree. Known among his friends for being confident and sociable, he often used his phone to document small moments, posting them to share with classmates. He had traveled to Hyderabad with a group of friends for exams and was now making his way home to Warangal. The trip was unplanned in its timing, but he saw it as a chance to relax after weeks of study. For Rahul, the walk along the service path beside the railway was casual. The group had chosen the shortcut to save time, following a dirt strip that ran close to the tracks. He carried a small backpack slung loosely over one shoulder and kept his phone in hand. When one friend mentioned the idea of a trackside selfie, Rahul decided to make it more striking by standing directly on the rails, with the background stretching into the distance. The area was a narrow corridor, bordered by scattered shrubs and low concrete walls. The track surface was a bed of loose ballast stone, uneven and shifting underfoot. Overhead, wires crisscrossed against the pale sky, their insulators clicking faintly in the heat. The rail itself gleamed where it caught the sunlight, showing it had seen recent traffic. Passenger trains in the area often reached speeds of 50 to 60 miles per hour along open stretches. Engineers had limited braking ability at such velocity. Stopping distance could exceed half a mile. From the approach curve near that section, visibility for both train crews and anyone on the track was restricted until the final seconds. Railway police had previously issued safety warnings in the district after incidents involving pedestrians and photography. Several minutes before the impact, the group heard a horn in the far distance, but could not tell its direction due to echoes from surrounding structures. Rahul had already positioned himself in the center of the track, adjusting his stance as he framed the shot. Friends called out reminders about the scheduled train, but he continued lining up the angle. The ballast shifted slightly under his sneakers as he turned sideways, facing the phone. The train appeared suddenly from the curve, its size filling the space between the embankments. Friends shouted all at once, voices overlapping with the blast of the locomotive horn. Rahul twisted toward the noise, his expression tightening as he stepped to the side. The uneven stones rolled beneath him, and his foot caught. He stumbled halfway clear, but the engine was already upon him. The front edge of the locomotive struck him at full speed, the impact violent and immediate. His body was thrown off the track into the low grass beside the ballast. The noise of the passing cars drowned everything else, the wind from their movement flattening the nearby weeds. When the final carriage passed, his friends moved toward him, but stopped short. The injuries were catastrophic, and it was clear there was nothing they could do. A few stood motionless. Others paced the edge of the path, still holding their phones in their hands without realizing. Railway police arrived within minutes, their vehicle pulling to a stop on the service road. Officers spoke briefly with the group before securing the scene and covering the body. Rahul's backpack was found intact beside him, while his phone lay several feet away, its screen cracked but still lit. The last image on it showed him mid-step, the train's front already entering the frame. By late afternoon, the body was released to his family in Warangal. The funeral was held quietly the next day, attended by relatives and a small group of classmates. Local authorities renewed their warnings against photography on or near active tracks, noting that the accident had unfolded in less than 5 seconds from the moment the train became visible. It was November 18, 2014, when the third shift at Midwest Chemical Processing Plant in Detroit became a nightmare that would forever change industrial safety protocols. James Thompson, 45, had been the backbone of the night maintenance crew for 12 years. A quiet, methodical man standing 5 feet 8 inches with calloused hands and graying temples, he carried the weight of responsibility both at work and at home. Divorced 3 years prior, James lived alone in a cramped apartment on Detroit's east side, working double shifts to meet child support obligations for his 2 teenagers, Sarah and Michael. His co-workers knew James as the guy who never missed a shift and always followed procedures. What they didn't know was that beneath his reserved exterior, James harbored growing concerns about the plant's aging infrastructure. He'd noticed corroded fittings and pressure irregularities, but management seemed more interested in production quotas than safety reports. That's when his 17-year-old son, Michael, a tech-savvy high school senior, set up a cloud backup system on his father's smartphone, teaching him how to record and automatically upload videos as evidence of safety violations. For 3 weeks, James had been quietly documenting his concerns. Short clips of leaking valves and corroded pipes are automatically uploaded to cloud storage, creating an inadvertent digital diary of industrial negligence. The night shift on November 18th started normally. James clocked in at 11 p.m. and began his rounds. Near Tank 7, pressure readings were climbing beyond normal parameters, and the emergency release valve showed severe corrosion. At 11:47 p.m., James pulled out his phone and began recording, narrating his observations. The live stream captured his methodical approach as he attempted to manually release the dangerous pressure buildup, describing the corroded fitting that had been flagged but never addressed. What happened next unfolded in terrifying slow motion. The corroded fitting failed catastrophically. The tank ruptured with explosive force, releasing a massive vapor cloud. Within seconds, the cloud found an ignition source from a nearby electrical panel, creating a fireball that engulfed the entire section. The live stream continued for 8 more seconds, recording the initial blast before connection was lost. James suffered burns over 95% of his body, his respiratory system destroyed by superheated gases. He died within 30 seconds, a victim of the very hazards he'd been documenting. The explosion shook buildings 2 miles away, bringing fire departments racing to the scene. The plant's evacuation procedures prevented additional casualties. Michael accessed his father's cloud storage, discovering the automatically uploaded footage that captured the exact moment of disaster. The video became crucial evidence for OSHA investigators, revealing the precise sequence of equipment failures and management negligence. The wrongful death lawsuit resulted in a multi-million-dollar settlement and sweeping safety changes. James Thompson's final documentation had exposed systemic failures endangering countless workers. Today, the plant operates under new safety standards requiring digital documentation with automatic cloud backup. James's legacy lives on in every safety report uploaded, ensuring no workers' concerns are ignored. It was October 1st, 1995, a crisp autumn day at Niagara Falls where thousands of tourists gathered to witness the breathtaking cascade of water thundering down the 167-foot drop. Among the crowd stood 39-year-old Robert Overacker, a stunt school graduate from Camarillo, California, whose heart raced with anticipation. After 7 years of planning, today would be the day he'd attempt something extraordinary. Jet skiing over the edge of Horseshoe Falls with a rocket-propelled parachute strapped to his back. This wasn't just about thrill-seeking. Overacker had a message. The jet ski he'd ride bore a sign reading, "Save the Homeless," a cause he genuinely cared about. His brother Michael Zurich and friend Christopher Yeoman stood ready with cameras to document what they believed would be a spectacular success. Footage that would draw attention to the plight of those living on the streets. What the onlookers didn't know was that they were about to witness a man's final moments on Earth. At 12:35 p.m., Overacker entered the Niagara River near the Canadian Niagara Power Plant. The jet ski's engine roared as he accelerated toward the massive waterfall, navigating the rapids with surprising skill. His confidence was evident. He'd prepared for this moment for years, twice before traveling to the falls, only to be talked out of the stunt by concerned friends. As he approached the brink, tourists raised their cameras. German visitor Manfred Baldus captured the fateful moment on video. Overacker speeding towards certain danger, determination written across his face. The jet ski reached the edge and Overacker let go, raising his arms triumphantly as he began the plunge. This was the moment when his rocket-propelled parachute was supposed to deploy, carrying him safely to the churning waters below. But something went terribly wrong. The parachute failed to open. Some reports later suggested it wasn't properly attached to his body, a fatal oversight in equipment preparation. For 5.6 seconds, Overacker fell through the air, perhaps realizing in those final moments that his safety system had failed him. He struck the water at the base of the falls with devastating force. As Parks Police dispatcher Tom Dettenbeck would later explain, "When you're hitting water, it's like hitting cement at that height." Initially, some witnesses thought they saw Overacker swimming in the turbulent waters below. This gave momentary hope that he might have somehow survived. In reality, what they observed was likely his body being violently tossed by the powerful rapids, a cruel illusion of life, where there was none. Staff from the Maid of the Mist tour boat recovered Overacker's body from the water. Despite desperate attempts to revive him, he was pronounced dead at Niagara General Hospital an hour after his plunge. Overacker became the 15th person since 1901 to intentionally go over Niagara Falls in or on a device, and the 5th to die in the attempt. He left behind his wife, Lori, and a community shocked by his passing. The tragedy of Robert Overacker serves as a grim reminder of how quickly adventure can turn to disaster. His death wasn't the last at the falls. 6 more people have intentionally gone over since 1995, with 2 losing their lives. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of Overacker's story is the footage that captured his final moments. Arms raised in what looked like triumph, unaware that he was seconds away from eternity, all in pursuit of a stunt that was meant to help others but instead left his loved ones in mourning. Pavel Kashin. It was October 8, 2017, when the unthinkable happened to Frank and Margaret O'Brien in Pine Ridge Community, Northern California. Frank, 67, was a methodical man who had spent 35 years delivering mail through rain and shine. His meticulous nature made him a favorite among residents who could set their clocks by his punctual deliveries. Margaret, 64, possessed the nurturing spirit that made her beloved by countless children during her 20-year tenure. serving lunch at the local elementary school. Her warm smile and extra portions for hungry kids earned her the nickname Grandma Maggie among students. Both lived on modest pensions in their cozy mountain retreat, a small wooden home they had purchased 10 years earlier when rising housing prices forced them from the valley below. The 1,200 square foot cabin represented their American dream on a budget, complete with a wraparound porch where they spent evenings watching deer graze in their yard. The couple had always been practical about their financial limitations. Their fire safety preparations consisted of basic garden hoses and clearing brush when Frank's arthritis allowed. However, after recent break-ins plagued their neighborhood, Frank had reluctantly invested in a simple 2-camera security system. One camera monitored their front porch, while another watched their living room, both automatically uploading footage to cloud storage every 30 minutes. That fateful afternoon at 3:15 p.m., both cameras were recording when unexpected wind shifts transformed their peaceful Sunday into a nightmare. The exterior camera captured the terrifying speed at which flames consumed their wooden fence and the dry vegetation surrounding their property. Within minutes, their sanctuary became a death trap as embers ignited their roof shingles. The footage revealed Frank's desperate attempt to protect their home, wielding their garden hose against the advancing inferno. His methodical postal worker precision served him even in crisis as he systematically wet down the house exterior, starting with the most vulnerable areas. However, the thick smoke overwhelmed his aging lungs, and he collapsed near their front steps, still clutching the hose. Meanwhile, the interior camera documented Margaret's frantic efforts to gather their important documents from the living room. Her nurturing instincts kicked in as she tried to save their precious memories, photo albums, and social security paperwork. Tragically, smoke filled the narrow hallway, trapping her inside their bedroom area. The carbon monoxide silently claimed both victims as they succumbed to smoke inhalation and toxic gas exposure. Both cameras continued recording until the flames destroyed the equipment, but their final upload occurred 25 minutes before destruction, preserving the complete timeline of events in haunting detail. Firefighters discovered their bodies 2 days later when the area was declared safe for search and rescue operations. The recovered cloud footage provided investigators with a heartbreaking but complete account of how the rapidly moving fire trapped the elderly couple in their final moments. Their death sparked significant changes in emergency protocols across Northern California. The incident highlighted critical gaps in rural communication systems, leading to improved evacuation notification procedures throughout the region. Frank and Margaret's final moments, preserved by technology Frank had installed for security, became a catalyst for protecting other families from similar tragedies. The O'Brien story serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly nature's fury can overwhelm even the most prepared individuals, and how their legacy continues through the safety improvements their sacrifice inspired.
It was October 25, 2018, and married couple Meenakshi Murthy and Vishnu Viswanath were exploring Yosemite National Park as part of their ongoing documentation of America's most beautiful natural landmarks. The 30 and 29-year-old software engineers from India had built a popular travel blog called Holidays and Happily Ever Afters, sharing their adventures with thousands of Instagram followers who loved their stunning photography from dangerous and scenic locations around the world. Meenakshi and Vishnu had met in college and bonded over their shared love of travel and photography. After moving to the United States for work, they had spent their weekends and vacations exploring national parks, always seeking the most dramatic and photogenic viewpoints. Their Instagram account featured breathtaking images from cliff edges, mountain peaks, and other precarious locations that required careful planning and considerable risk-taking. The couple was known among their followers for pushing boundaries to capture the perfect shot, often posing near cliff edges and dangerous viewpoints that made viewers nervous just looking at the photos. Ironically, Meenakshi had previously written about selfie dangers on their blog, asking, "Is our life worth just a photo?" But the pursuit of spectacular content for their growing social media presence seemed to override their awareness of the risks involved. Their Yosemite trip was planned as a multi-day photography expedition, with Taft Point being one of their most anticipated locations. The scenic overlook was famous among photographers for its unobstructed views and lack of safety railings, allowing for dramatic photos that appeared to show people suspended in midair above the valley floor 800 feet below. On that fateful afternoon, Meenakshi and Vishnu set up their camera on a tripod at Taft Point, carefully positioning themselves near the cliff edge for what they hoped would be their most spectacular selfie yet. Other visitors watched as they arranged their shot, adjusting the camera angle and testing different poses to achieve the perfect composition. The couple appeared confident and experienced, showing no signs of concern about the dangerous location. They activated the camera's timer function and moved into position for their final photo, standing close together near the edge of the cliff with the vast Yosemite Valley stretching out behind them. As the camera counted down to capture the image, something went wrong. Whether they lost their balance, stepped too close to the edge, or were affected by wind, both Meenakshi and Vishnu fell together off the cliff. Their camera continued recording, capturing the moments before and after their fatal fall. Other visitors who witnessed the tragedy immediately called for help, but there was nothing that could be done. The couple had fallen 800 feet to the valley floor below, and the impact was instantly fatal. The National Park Service recovered their bodies and confirmed that they had died from the trauma of the fall. Their camera and tripod were found exactly where they had set them up, containing the final photos and videos that documented their last moments. The images showed their excitement and anticipation, completely unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. Their deaths became international news and sparked renewed discussions about selfie culture and the extreme risks people take for social media content. Their story was widely cited as an example of how the pursuit of the perfect photo can lead to fatal consequences even for experienced travelers who understood the dangers involved.
It was October 22nd, 2015, near Hoedspruit, South Africa. The morning sun had already burned through the thin mist, and the dry bush-veld air carried the low calls of distant birds. The open safari vehicle moved steadily along the dirt track, its passengers unaware that the next stop would bring them within moments of irreversible danger. Caroline Mercer, 35, was on her honeymoon with her husband Mark, a project coordinator from Sussex. She was known for her meticulous planning and love of travel. This trip had been booked a year in advance, chosen for its combination of wildlife photography and quiet lodges. Caroline had taken photography workshops in preparation, though she relied mostly on her phone for quick snapshots. Her approach to the safari was enthusiastic and hands-on. She was eager to capture images that felt personal, not just the standard distant animal shots. The couple's guide had explained that predators could be approached safely in vehicles if passengers remained still and seated. Caroline understood the reasoning, but in her mind, leaning out for a better angle felt like a minor risk, especially with the lions lying motionless in the grass. The track cut through open savanna dotted with acacia trees, their shadows sharp under the bright sun, grass bent in the wind, dry and pale, with patches of earth baked hard. The lions lay under a tree's thin shade, their golden coats blending almost perfectly with the ground. Flies moved lazily around them, and their tails flicked intermittently. The air felt still except for the occasional rustle from a nearby bush. Adult African lions can weigh over 400 pounds and reach speeds of nearly 35 miles per hour in short bursts. Their bite force is powerful enough to crush bone, and even seemingly calm individuals can switch to full predatory behavior instantly. Guides in the region rely on the principle that animals perceive vehicles as single, non-threatening units, something disrupted if a person stands or leans out. Minutes before the attack, the guide stopped at what he judged a safe distance. He reminded the group to remain seated. Caroline shifted forward, holding her phone, and after a glance toward Mark, rose to her knees on the seat. She leaned out past the open side to frame both lions in her shot. No one realized the closer of the two had raised its head, watching her with fixed attention. In a movement so quiet it was almost unnoticeable, the lion rose and began a low stalk, each step deliberate and silent. Mark called her name, and the guide's voice cut in sharply, but the gap was already closing. The lion broke into a short charge. The impact came with a heavy thud as its paw struck Caroline's shoulder, claws hooking into her. She was pulled from the vehicle before she could brace herself, her phone falling into the grass. The sound of the struggle was brief but violent, the tearing of fabric, deep growls and shouts from the vehicle. The guide started the engine and drove forward, revving and shouting in an attempt to break the lion's focus. Another ranger, arriving from a nearby track, joined in. The lion maintained its grip for several seconds before retreating a few steps, still watching. By then, Caroline was motionless. Rangers tranquilized the lion within minutes. Caroline's body was recovered quickly, but the injuries were unsurvivable. Her phone was found near the track, the final image partially blurred by motion. Her remains were flown back to England within the week. The funeral in Sussex was private, attended by family and a few close friends. The reserve reinforced its safety rules, adding fixed barriers on open vehicles during predator sightings, a change that guides later said might have prevented the incident entirely. It was March 15, 2014, when Danny Rodriguez's dedication to safety protocols couldn't save him from a preventable tragedy at Quick Stop gas station in suburban Houston, Texas. Danny, a 41-year-old father of 2 teenage sons, had been working the graveyard shift at the station for 3 years. His wife Maria often worried about him working alone during those quiet 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. hours. But Danny was methodical and cautious by nature. Exactly the kind of employee you'd want handling fuel and potentially dangerous equipment. His supervisor frequently praised his attention to detail and commitment to following every safety procedure to the letter. For weeks, Danny had been reporting a persistent gasoline odor near pump number 3. Despite his repeated requests, management kept postponing the professional inspection, citing budget constraints and claiming the smell wasn't strong enough to warrant immediate concern. Danny's meticulous nature made him check that area multiple times each shift, documenting the issue in his daily reports. The Quick Stop featured 8 security cameras strategically positioned to monitor all pump areas and the store interior. The system automatically uploaded footage to cloud storage every 10 minutes, a feature that would prove crucial in the investigation that followed. At 3:20 a.m. that fateful morning, the exterior cameras captured Danny conducting his routine pump inspection. The footage showed him crouching near pump 3, his flashlight revealing what appeared to be a significant leak in the underground fuel line. Gas vapors were clearly visible accumulating around the pump area, despite Danny's immediate attempts to activate the emergency fuel shutoff system. The security cameras recorded Danny's methodical response. He followed protocol perfectly, attempting to contain the situation while the vapors continued building. Multiple camera angles captured the moment a customer pulled up to pump 2 in a beat-up pickup truck. The man stepped out casually, a lit cigarette dangling from his lips, completely ignoring the prominent no smoking signs posted throughout the station. Danny noticed the customer and began moving toward him, likely to warn about the dangerous situation. The cameras captured the exact moment the cigarette ignited the accumulated gas vapors. The massive explosion engulfed both men instantly, with Danny suffering fatal thermal burns and trauma from the blast pressure. The smoking customer was also killed immediately. The explosion destroyed 3 gas pumps and damaged 6 vehicles in the vicinity. Fortunately, the CCTV footage had been uploaded to cloud servers just 10 minutes before the cameras were destroyed in the blast. Fire investigators used the multi-angle footage to reconstruct the exact sequence of events. The video evidence clearly showed Danny's professional response to the gas leak and the customer's fatal disregard for safety warnings. The investigation revealed that the underground fuel line had been deteriorating for months, with Danny's reports providing a clear timeline of the developing hazard. The tragedy led to significant safety improvements across the country. Enhanced no-smoking enforcement protocols were implemented, along with mandatory emergency shutoff systems and improved vapor detection equipment for all gas stations. Danny's meticulous documentation and the security footage became the foundation for new industry safety standards. Danny Rodriguez died doing what he always did, following safety procedures and trying to protect others. His legacy lives on in the enhanced safety measures that now protect countless gas station workers and customers throughout Texas.
It was November 2017, and 20-year-old Toni Kelly was living her dream European adventure, documenting every moment for her thousands of social media followers back in New Zealand. The vibrant young woman had saved for months to afford the trip, working multiple jobs while studying to fund her travels across Europe. Her infectious enthusiasm and creative photography had earned her a growing following of people who loved experiencing her adventures vicariously through her posts. Toni had been traveling for several weeks, visiting Paris, Amsterdam, and other major European cities before arriving in London. She was staying in a modest hotel in the city center, excited to explore the historic landmarks and cultural attractions that she had dreamed of seeing since childhood. Her social media accounts were filled with photos from famous locations, always featuring her bright smile and adventurous spirit. The evening of the incident had been particularly enjoyable for Toni, who had spent the day sightseeing and socializing with other travelers she had met at her hotel. She had been documenting her London experience with various photos and was known among her followers for taking creative selfies that captured both her personality and the beauty of her surroundings. Her room on the second floor offered views of the London cityscape, which she found inspiring for photography. As the evening progressed, Toni decided to take one final selfie from her hotel room window to capture the London lights behind her. She had been drinking earlier in the evening and was in high spirits about her travel experiences, eager to share another memorable image with her followers. The window in her room opened fully, providing an unobstructed view of the street below and the city beyond. Toni opened the second floor window and leaned out to get the perfect angle for her photo, trying to frame herself against the London skyline. In her attempt to capture the ideal shot, she leaned too far out of the window and lost her balance. The combination of alcohol, the awkward position required for the selfie, and the height of the window created a deadly situation that unfolded in seconds. She fell from the second floor to the pavement below, suffering severe brain injuries from the impact with the concrete. Other hotel guests heard the commotion and immediately called emergency services, who arrived within minutes and rushed Toni to the hospital in critical condition. Medical teams worked frantically to save her life, but the trauma to her brain was too severe. Despite the best efforts of medical professionals, Toni never recovered from her injuries and passed away in the hospital several days later. A coroner's inquest later revealed that she had alcohol and cocaine in her system at the time of the fall, which likely contributed to her impaired judgment and loss of balance. In a final act of generosity, Toni's family made the decision to donate her organs, giving others a second chance at life through her tragedy. Her death became international news as another example of selfie-related fatalities among young travelers, prompting discussions about hotel window safety and the risks of taking selfies from dangerous positions.
Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.